Yep, the time being 4:05, I'll call the North Attleboro School Building Committee to order. First on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll pass it to you guys to do it, since you guys are in person.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hello, everybody. How we doing? Michelle, what's the first on the agenda?
So we have 3 discussion items today. First is discuss final program acceptance, working group work to finalize spatial areas by the end of July.
So I think we're going to, Ron, you're going to present some updates on the space program and site planning discussion, and then we're going to talk very quickly about mechanical systems.
Yes. We had a great meeting with you all. Okay. So I'm going to the chair and then go into the.
Ron, sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you. For some reason, you're cutting out, so we're kind of hearing every other word.
Okay, I am getting a lot of feedback.
Let me... Okay, try that.
I think you silenced the microphone instead of muting it, maybe.
I think that's on my, I think that's on my,
No, it says mute all. Did you click that? Top?
no, that's all the participants.
Be careful, it's muted.
Ron, can you mute yourself and try again?
Sure, you hear me better now?
Maybe.
Go ahead, let's see, just see, because we can hear you, it was cutting out.
Okay. So, if you can see your screen, you should be looking at the spreadsheet, page 7. And you'll notice that at PDP, we were at 227,000 square feet, plus or minus, and now we're at 226,506. So the meeting, EILs have been going very well. The decision was made to keep the general classrooms at 850 square feet for reasons of project-based learning and, the idea that we need to have some storage in those rooms. As we go down, the decision was to keep the rooms at 600 square feet, and that was 9 of those with the small teacher planning of 100 square feet. And the small seminar rooms, we decided on to keep it 500. So science remains the same, special ed remains the same. The art classrooms remains the same. The decision was to reduce the band room to 1,500 square feet, aligned with the guidelines from MSBA. We did another visit with the CILs into the band room, your existing band room, which is 1,500 square feet. And although that room is not conducive to what they're doing today, having been built a long time ago, the decision was the space feels right, especially since the music program will be getting a 1,500 square foot chorus room and a 200 square foot ensemble room to support the program space that the programs that don't have the space needed right now. So looking back at the educational program of music, how the spaces will be used, how they might be able to be used together, the decision was that let's keep that aligned with the MSBA guideline because it feels right for exactly how they'll be rolling out these music programs. Does that make sense, Carol? Can you still hear me?
Yep. We can hear you.
Okay. When we got into the non-chapter 74, there was a bit of a change here in that the fabrication lab and the advanced manufacturing lab, looking at schedules, looking at the way the programs will work, the decision was if we make the advanced manufacturing a bit larger, to 2,400 square feet, as opposed to 1,500 square feet, then we can remove the fabrication lab from the program in its entirety. And what that allows us to do is run both programs out of one space. And if we consider the advanced manufacturing and fabrication lab workshop as the production space for the hands-on learning, and you couple that with the design studio, which is kind of a clean design space, and you couple that again with the robotics program, that between the three, the 900, the 2,400, and the 1,200, is going to work. And it's going to work with the schedule, and it's going to work with the programs, and it's going to work really well. And so the decision was to reduce that down to zero. So the fabrication lab goes away and is combined with advanced manufacturing. So then when we talk about a teacher station, the TV studio, which was previously 400 square feet, is going to remain 400 square feet. But we're going to add to that TV studio an instructional space for editing, which essentially now gives you a 900 square foot space, which is the teaching studio we're looking for. And then we're going to have 2 little recording studios associated with that, as well as the control room. So in and of itself, between the deletion of some space or the reduction of some space, and then the addition of this space, we're still within the same space that we started with. There's been further discussion on the drama classroom. We're trying to see and schedule, like, how is the drama classroom going to get scheduled, going to get used, and so forth. And is there a way to continue to look at that square footage and continue to look at, you know, how do we multi-purpose some of the other performance spaces in the music program and so forth. So that's where we landed. And right now, I think even after today's work group meeting and then follow-up meeting with Peter and Michelle, I think we're pretty good on all of these spaces. A little bit more work to do, but we're pretty good with all of these. And one thing we have to check in with is the athletic director when he gets back and is available. We want to make sure that we're right sizing all of the physical education space. And this is just like a confirmation along these lines. And the things that we think are going to be discussed is the PE coach offices and the referee space. We also want to know a little bit more about how is the PE alternative going to be used. In other words, can half the space be used as one program, another space being set up as another, so that it works with the physical education program. The other thing that we want to right size is the cafeteria. We have a meeting coming up on the 25th with the food service program. You've all hired a consultant in terms of nutrition and so forth and layout. And obviously we're working with our consultant, and we're all going to meet on the 25th and continue to work through right sizing these spaces for the way that dining and breakfast, or I should say lunch and breakfast, want to take place within the schedule of the school. And then everything else essentially again has been confirmed as kind of where we think we need to be. We have talked a little bit about custodial and maintenance in terms of that being sort of a standalone building, kind of like you have now, which is outside of the building itself for any additional space that's needed for outdoors. And what we're looking at, like I said, is a little bit of a reduction, about 500 square feet since the last time we met. What we'd like to do, if there are no questions, is have the building committee kind of authorize the working group that once we make the final tweaks to this, that they have the authority to say, okay, it's the end of July, because that's our target date, it's the end of July. That's the program that we're going. Any questions?
And you're proposing that in lieu of bringing it back to the full committee?
So, sorry, Ron, I think it's because I was muted. Mike Borg, town manager, is asking, you're making that recommendation, sort of using the working group in lieu of bringing it back before the full committee, correct?
Right, we would bring it back full committee at the August full committee date. We just want the working group to have the authority to say, look, unless the school building committee is going to change something, we on the education side of things believe that that's the program.
Ron, can you just be clear with, I think we're talking about relatively small adjustments, right?
Yes, this is, like, right now, we're into this, you know, but we're looking at minor tweaks.
They've done a lot of work already, so this would be very minor just to be able to say.
I can speak to a couple things. We're looking at how we're going to use that alternative PE space and see if we can create half of it to be a classroom so that we could deliver health classes and other things in that space, but then have an area that would be kind of like that traditional weight room and things like that, but there'd be an instructional space within it. And then the Black Box Theater, which is the drama studio, we really feel like that might be a space that is too big right now, and, you know, being cognizant of wanting to get those numbers down as reasonably as possible, but still meet the program needs. We're thinking about making that space a little bit smaller and thinking in terms of how will the CILs specifically use that space. On the other hand, we're also looking really carefully at the gym itself to make sure we can fit 2 full PE classes in there and seat the entire student body in that space, because that will be the one community space that we have. So those are the tweaks right now that we're still, you know, just trying to fine tune. I don't anticipate any other major changes.
And then the other thing is, we're going to be receiving the comments from the the space plan that was submitted with the preliminary design plan, so, you know, there'll be some reaction to what those comments give us.
Right. Right.
Okay. Any other
Are
comments?
you looking for a vote?
I don't think we need a
Consensus,
vote.
maybe.
I think consensus is fine if you're, I don't think there's gonna be a significant change, and you're all gonna vote on the PSR. So if you don't like something when you hear about it in August, which I think you've got a preview of what mostly it is, you certainly don't need to accept it.
Yeah, these are fairly, I don't mean they're not important, but if we make any changes, they're fairly immaterial relative to the square footage size, right? So I don't think anybody in the working group, me included, Keith, Carrie, would ever come back and say, oh, we just added 10,000 square feet. But we're not going to do that, right? We're talking hundreds here, hundreds there, a few shifts. So
Just to support that, and as John said, Carrie and I are the 2 kind of non-educators that are in that working group. And that is very much what's been going on over the last 2 or 3 weeks, is everybody's really focused on making sure that the building is sized to fit the ed plan, but not like 1 foot bigger than that. So like, what are the trade-offs? How do you maximize the space? How do we make sure the space is used as much of the day as possible? So if there are these kind of spaces that might get orphaned during a day, like that physical education space,
Right.
how do you tweak it to make it something that would be fully utilized? So just my 2 cents on it.
And so Keith, you're on that?
I'm on that, yeah.
Is there a discussion of what is reimbursable and what is not as a part of that? And
Literally,
Every day.
And then that's part of the tweaks too. So like, okay, if you do it this way, it's not reimbursable. If you can squeeze this kind of aspect of the ed plan into it, now it is reimbursable.
so
How
is
do
there
you
any,
maximize that?
is there portions of that we know now that are not reimbursable?
Just the things we've always talked about. What are the examples of the
Special
non-reimbursable?
education.
Well, anything that is, anything like, you know, growing the gym, growing the auditorium beyond what the guidelines are not reimbursable. Everything else is probably, growing back of house spaces is not reimbursable, administration spaces. Most everything else is going to be dependent on what the MSBA tells us.
But right now, let me just kind of because it's an important question that Mike's asking. Right now, this 226,000 square foot building, can you give it percentage-wise, Ron, like what you believe in theory might not absolutely be reimbursable?
Yeah.
Or might absolutely be not reimbursable, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a little misleading because the program right now says that the guidelines is 198,000. And we're at 226. But if you remember at PDP, we said that right now under your core academic, we are technically over if we use 850 as a guideline. The MSBA says the maximum square footage you can have for a classroom is 950. We are making them 100 square feet. So what that means is traditionally in the past, the MSBA has said, okay, we're making them 100 square feet less than what we would support. So you have 3,700 to play with for things that are associated with core academic, such as the planning room, and such as small group seminar rooms, such as science programs. And so for that reason, we fully expect the variation of 2,750 square feet to be supported. So that's why we're at, we're thinking, you know, that even though it's outside the guideline, we'll get it supported. The second thing to consider is special education right now. The way you run your program, we're 2,390 square feet above the MSBA guideline. However, again, the MSBA traditionally in the past, when this is certified or reviewed by DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, they will support it. And so we fully expect that to get supported. And so then if you look at art and music, we're right on target. If you look at education and technologies, we are 4,810 square feet over. That is something that we've been working on pretty hard. We just took our base out of that program, combined it with some others. So right now we're 4,810 over that the MSBA would not support. So that's how much square feet we're over right now. In health education, we're 4,000 square feet over. So of 220,000 square feet, we're currently over by 1,810 square feet. And 4,000 of that is for the gym, which will allow us to get at least 1,000 spectators, which is what you have today, as well as 2 cross court and 1 main court for basketball.
Yeah.
And then the media center we're right on, the auditorium we're right on, food service and dining, we're 2,575 beyond the guideline. There are a couple of factors here. One factor is that plans were written a long time ago for the rules of free and reduced lunch have changed. So now that everyone has free lunch, participation in these programs own significant. And the way in which nutrition is served today has changed a lot since the way these programs were set up. But we are meeting on the 25th with the food service team. We will do about rate setting this. Medical, we're only over 104 square feet because of the team in our office. Registration, we're right on MSBA. And with audio and maintenance, we're right on MSBA. And that's where we're at. And then 300 square feet, which we believe may get supported, is for 100 square foot lactation rooms that are required by code. And so essentially that's where we are when it comes to the 226 versus the 198.
All right, Ron, thank you. Just one follow-up question on that. And just as clarification, if the max square footage is 198 and then the current estimate is at 227, is it we can go up to 198 even if you're trading the 100 square feet out of the classrooms?
I mean, the way it
Or
works.
is it eligible expenses, and if you meet it or you don't meet it, it's not going to count towards the total?
The 198 is the guideline, is the guidelines, not the max. Most every project that we've had has had something that exceeded the guidelines and
Okay.
got approved. So I think from what Ron's trying to do is say, these are the spaces that have the least, in my rough calculation, when you look at the gym being over, you look at the food service, which I think is gonna be difficult unless they're changing their policy there, those are probably not going to be reimbursed.
Right, so that,
That maybe is a third of that 28,000 square feet
okay,
or something.
good to know. But what I'm asking is, because you saved an 100 square feet per classroom, right? That's not going to go and be eligible to be used elsewhere in the project.
It's not like that way.
That's right, so.
There's
so
a gross square footage
So you
number.
saved 100 square feet, but it doesn't benefit anywhere else in the project. You can't apply it to somewhere else,
You can't apply it to another category.
to another category.
So like, if it was within the,
Classroom
if it was in the
space.
classroom,
Classrooms.
we could have, but you can't take
Okay.
classrooms and put it into gymnasium. See what I mean? So,
And
yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, we did that, right? Like that,
Yes.
part of the reason we
Oh, yeah.
squeezed it to 850 was so that we could get the academic spaces that we needed for the program.
Okay,
Yeah. And we feel, by the way, we feel very confident that that 850 is a good number. We actually
Yeah, we looked at it.
mapped it out and, so.
And did, I thought, a really good job of talking about the storage too, because there was a conversation about going even smaller than that. And then you start thinking about, well, how much space does a bank of shelves occupy? And as soon as you start doing that, you're like, oh crap, all of a sudden now this is a really small room.
Yeah.
Right.
And so where are you gonna put,
Yeah.
the shelves? So I thought they did a really good job of being in the physical space, showing what it, like they actually had the teachers in the classroom that one time, they had the desks, they had the space, they had the shelves, and they're like, okay, this is what 20 kids would feel like in this room. This is what 25 kids would feel like in this room. So I thought that you guys did a really nice job of kind of mapping that out.
Can I ask a follow-up to Mike's question? Because, this is something we're all going to have to talk about over the next 12 months or 11 months, I guess. But we have the opportunity, correct me if I'm wrong, to advocate for all of this space with MSBA, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so whether or not they approve it, but we will advocate that, after all this work, this exact square footage allows us to implement our educational plan. And then we kind of fight that fight. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. Yes.
how successful are those?
How successful, Ron or Tim, are?
I mean, what's your experience in the past then?
Well, I think some of them are less, some of them, they come into three categories. Things they almost always approve, things that they, in my experience, pretty much always reject, and things that are in the middle. And I think these are gonna fall into those three categories.
Okay.
So like the always reject gymnasium
The gymnasium, they'll reject.
above, in that auditorium, above the math, like the actual.
Yeah, and just to be clear for the public who's watching, they're not gonna reject the gymnasium, they'll reject the additional square footage of the
Yeah,
gymnasium.
that's right.
Reject
yeah,
means
yeah.
they won't
We are
give
not,
us any money for it, won't reimburse.
Above and
us.
beyond
Above
what's
and beyond,
allowable.
Yeah.
That's all that reject means, it doesn't, okay.
Yeah,
I'll say the gymnasium, and again, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole today, but having the opportunity to provide 2 cross courts, I can't imagine building a building for the next 50 years without doing that. Maybe, right? Because we're constantly fighting for space, so
Yeah.
it's just an interesting calculus at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
we're not over on, as Ron mentioned, on auditorium.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't, sorry, we're not over on auditorium, I didn't mean to imply we were. All right,
great, thank you.
question. Thanks, Ron.
Yep.
What's next?
Discuss preliminary option evaluation criteria.
Okay.
So maybe I'll start that,
Share my screen again.
Ron, if you can bring up that criteria.
Yep.
So this is the matrix that we've developed roughly to evaluate the four options. And I think it's important to note why we do this. So we do it because it's a good way to go through very systemically and kind of create or order your thinking around what is a good option, for one thing. And then we also do it because what we do now in September as a building committee is going to really be voted on, I made this point before, but voted on in April or June of next year. So it's important that we have a record of what we talked about and did in September, and it's important that the public understand that it was an open and transparent and as objective as possible. I mean, inherently, some of these are going to require subjective kind of ratings, if you will, but it's important to do something that you can go back and say, we spent a lot of serious time as a committee looking at these options, and this is how we came up with the decision we came up with. So that's why we do it, obviously. The second, and so as opposed to, for instance, just having everybody here vote their, just what's your best favorite option, we try to bring some order and process to it. So the thing that when you go about these evaluation criteria, there's a lot of ways, well, there's not really a lot of ways, but there different places do them differently in terms of how they go about filling in these boxes that you see there, and Ron has more detail around this as we break it out, as you'll see in some of the other tabs, but there's ways to do it. Like, for instance, some of the criteria can be weighted to be more important than other criteria. There's always the discussion about, we have to be efficient and do something fairly quickly. I'm going to lay out the work plan, but this is all being done in the next 6 weeks or so, 6 to 8 weeks. And so, we need to be efficient. So we have an idea in what we want to propose in terms of how we complete this, but it starts with, at some level, agreeing on the criteria. Maybe the summary criteria, Ron, would be more effective to. So each of those boxes, this is how, Doran Whittier has proposed this, and we've looked at it and thought it made a lot of sense, but it's basically based on the preliminary design program considerations that we put in about, what we felt of the reasons what, are going to influence the decision. So under education, and then we did include a weighting multiplier there, which is arbitrary and can be adjusted. But, the weighting, for instance, for education on meeting the educational program goals, that's an obviously important aspect of the each analysis of the options. The growth and being future ready, so what options provide more opportunity to do that. Outdoor learning and connection to nature. Impacts to the middle school around education. And then when you look at site, the circulation and parking, and what does the best job of doing that, access to fields and overall site use, traffic, community use, what provides the best community use, safety and security, sustainability, logistics and construction impact, which, whenever you're building on the existing campus is going to be a big one. Some people may say it should be weighted more than 10 of the number there. Overall, then when you do get into cost, I think it's important to realize in cost at this level, it's pretty much comparative cost. So if a baseline, if an option is this much, another option might change. These options, some of the options are not going to change. We saw in the PDP that the options on Ad Reno and the two new options are not significantly different between them. I mean, I forget, I don't have it in front of me, but maybe a 5% difference between any of them, if that. So the costs are really comparative costs when you weigh it, as much as actual cost. And then operational cost is important, because some options are going to be, in the long run, easier to, or less, or more efficient to operate, and then net cost to the town. So we will take a stab at what a final project budget will look like and what we think the town share would be, but again, that'll be at this stage very preliminary. So these are the, and as you can see at the bottom, this is what we've done on most of our projects. They get scored somewhat on a 1 to 5 basis, and then with sort of traffic lights that attach to the 1 to 5 to make it a visual way for people to see. And largely, that's how, we kind of, when you've, I don't know if, Ron, if you have a completed one from another project, but, when you look at them, they actually visually show you kind of how the decision mapped out for the committee.
Tim, while Ron's looking for that, do you mind if I ask a question about just a few of the categories? Because do we have enough information now? There's a few categories that stuck out to me: sustainability, safety and security, and then operational costs. I'll come back, yeah. But do we have enough information with the options now to make a...
Comparatively, we do.
Comparatively,
Yes.
okay. We might need some help with that, because,
Yeah.
yeah.
Comparatively, we know some options will be more sustainable, for instance, the new ones versus the ad route.
Oh, okay,
or the base repair.
Thank you. So I was thinking more like, the details of like what kind of system we're gonna put in and that.
No, I mean,
Okay.
although we will know about that too, but
Yeah.
comparatively, we will know pretty much what you saw up
So
there.
2 observations, and the first one is that this is a very simple decision matrix. I think that we need to come to a common agreement on what each one of the categories and the criteria, the evaluation criteria, that should be set up and promulgated in advance. Because what I might think education is might be different than what Michelle is. But if we agree to what that term is, then we're all looking at it through the same lens, right? I think there should be a discussion on the weighting criteria and how, and have consensus among the committee about what the weighting criteria should be. There's different people will see different things, but I think once you agree to what the criteria are and then how to weight it, and the last part that I would tell you in all of this, I think you should do both the weighted and the unweighted results as a point of comparison to look at it, because you may see, and I've dealt with decision matrix for a very long time, an unweighted matrix might give you an insight of how it might be versus the weighted when you add in, cost or education, and it gives you another good comparison point and discussion point to look at. But if you're doing this, we have to have consensus of what each of the evaluation criteria are and what it means.
Right.
I think that goes to John's point about, what is this and can we make this determination right now?
What are we looking at, like, and what kind of thing, yeah.
Because we may have to look at it. We may not have, we don't know what the final cost today is. So we're going to make this, if you say cost, this is what we're saying cost means right now today when we're voting. And when are we looking?
Is it relative cost or is it
Right.
actual cost, right, yeah.
And when are we looking to do this evaluation?
Well, I'm going to walk through that in the work plan. It's over a series of meetings, and so the one thing that we did want to have this meeting discuss, well, there's a couple of things. One is for people to even respond by email to the criteria, just to help us understand, what other things, if you see something obviously missing, just like, these are kind of tried and true based on our experience, but if there's something very particular that we're missing that North Attleboro finds important, we should hear about that from anybody. But then the second thing is, obviously, when we've done, which have probably been through a dozen of these processes, and they take a long time to do them right, because you need to be able to say, why did you rate something a 2 and another thing a 3? You need to have actual, it needs to make sense and be kind of applied along a very...
Well, I would suggest that you use a word picture and identify what each one of the evaluation scores means in relationship to a particular category. So if 5 is, if we're going bowling scores instead of golf scores, right?
Yeah.
Higher numbers are better. The biggest number is obviously the best option under that scenario. Then you need to say what a 5 means as a result when looking at the evaluation criteria. Does it achieve this or not? And what differentiates that from the others?
Right, yeah.
It's a rubric. It's a word picture rubric.
So the mechanics of doing it, what we would propose, and what we've done on really every other project that we've been involved in, is that the working group sort of works with us to work through this kind of criteria, and then we present in a series of meetings, and, you know, a number of meetings I've laid out, the thinking around it so that the building committee can have its impact and say, I don't know why, you know, I heard your rationale for that to be a 5, I don't agree. You know, there's a debate and we have that kind of back and forth. But if you don't have a group take a stab at it and put a stake in the ground, it just becomes very unwieldy and it's hard to get a decision out of people when you have so many criteria and so many factors.
Ron, are we trying to score them in consensus as opposed to like each of us taking a card and putting like what we think are our individual votes and then summarizing it? You're suggesting that the working group with you guys will come up with a recommended score, and then you'll come back to us and you'll say, okay, we're saying education is 5, 3, 4, 3 or whatever, right? And then we'll do what you're saying. We'll sort of, you know, well, why is that a 5?
Here's an example of one I'll fill that.
I think we got that, but how do you?
But Keith's question about, is it a consensus number or is it individual? I kind of like the consensus approach.
It has to be, well, the idea is to, I would say, is
You have to
always
get
to
the
come up with
consensus at the end.
one scoring table that gets put on the website and tells
Right,
people, this
right.
is how the committee. So there may be, obviously, there could be, you know, in any committee, somebody might not particularly agree with one score, but, you know, is it really worth the hill to die on because you agree generally with
Then
what
you
the
would go with the
conclusion is?
individual, right, and then take the average of all the votes, because that way.
Well, that's the
That's
question.
the way to
That's
resolve
the
it.
question.
I think that would be
That's
the way to
question. See,
resolve
And I
this
would be in
sort of, you
favor
know,
of the individual,
differences.
that way you're not, every individual a part of the committee has an impact of what they think. We could have the open discussion about that and allow members of the committee to say what they think or how they believe or why they vote or would support, but then vote and then take the mean and apply that, or the average and apply that to
Yeah.
the card.
that's-
Yeah, there's some risk there, though. I'm not disagreeing with you. There's some risk there, though. It's almost like the golf handicapping system, where it's like, if, let's say someone's all ones, just because they're hell-bent on all ones, and like it really could skew the average.
Then you could take the top and the lowest
Yeah,
scores
that's
out.
what I'm saying. That's why I compare it to the handicapping system. It kind of takes away like the extremes.
I mean, in my experience, the differences are generally, you know, not like a lot of people think it's a 5 and a lot of people think it's a 1. It's
No,
a
5 and 4.
nuance.
I know. I just
Yeah.
give an example. So, yeah.
But if a person who's going to be completing this evaluates each of the designs in relation to each of the categories down the left side, so are they evaluating education as a standalone as to how it's best delivered in each of those and ranking them that way? And then, for example, so the education plan is the education plan, so that's relatively fixed because that's what it is. And then is traffic, it's tweaked for each of the designs, so that's like a less fixed thing. So how will someone know how to understand traffic in relation to each of the designs, or even security for that matter?
The education part's the perfect example, because you're taking the education plan and then you're applying it to each one of the facilities and the designs or concepts of those, and you're saying, how does that fit, and you're voting 1 through 5 on it. The traffic one is an interesting one, because you could say, well, I like the traffic plan with 1, but not so much with the others, and if you took it and you moved it to this, it would make it better, right? But that, I think, would be a part of the consensus discussion that would happen, and where it could come out and potentially yield into a change. So, but then you're evaluating, saying, is traffic, if we take the, option 1 and there's no change, okay, well, we all know what the traffic is like today, that would be, is it bad, is it good, is it, but how do you compare that compared to the other outcomes, which you may not be able to?
How do you compare the
Because I know what the traffic is today.
Yeah.
I'm looking at a design of what traffic might be, but until we know what people do when they drive it, I don't
Well,
know.
I mean,
You gotta rely on the, you gotta rely on the
I'm
fact
gonna
that
wa-
the designers are telling you that,
I-
like, the flow is gonna be
Everything
Yes,
is
yes, no,
somewhat
I get that and see, but, you know,
Tim, I have a question. The sustainability, I don't think the original one that he had up had 10 for sustainability. If you were to do, like, look at the city of Boston, they have a hard, fast rule by 2030, net zero on all public schools in the city of Boston. So their number 10, well, our number 10 might be a number 20 for the city of Boston. Does that have any movement? I don't know if you've done any projects over there where you've used this and their hard, fast rule is sustainability is going to be net zero by 2030, and anything you build in the future has to have a higher number?
I mean, sustainability now is different because the codes and some of these things, like the cities, you know,
Yeah.
they've got the pilots code where they're 10 of the cities adopted. A lot of the other city, the stretch code's different. There's a new code coming out in January that's gonna be even different. Sustainability now, I think, is gonna be much more around how far out, you know, I think for what I sense in North Attleboro is gonna be around, you know, return on investment and life cycle cost analysis, more than on making a sustainability statement, per se, like the city's trying, like Boston's trying to do.
So that's what I'm saying, where the number might be different there
Yeah.
than the one here. Okay.
Yeah, oh yeah, it would be different. I think there are some communities, I mean, if you go to Weston or Newton or someplace, I mean,
I think we as the committee should pick those numbers. We should,
I would be okay with a working group doing this analysis with regular checkpoints with us and opportunities, right? But I think before we farm this off to a working group, like Mike was saying, I would like to have those subcategories, they don't have to be detailed, but a definition for each one of the subcategories, and allow this group also, once those definitions are completed, to give our input in terms of what we want to weight, right? Because again, I saw a couple, maybe it was the impact of the middle school was a 10. I don't know what impact of middle school means, but once I do I really think it's going to warrant a 10? Potentially not, you know what I mean, just as an example. So if we can kind of go through that process and all agree on that framework and the weightings, then have the work group go with it. I think that's fair,
I
give
think
it some
that's
guidance.
I honestly think that's exactly the key, because at the end of the day, I just don't think it's going to be as like variable. Like, we're going to define what the category is.
Yeah.
Sustainability, for example. And if we define what that category is, and then we look at the 4 options, like, there's not going to be 10 different answers. Like, one's going to be more sustainable than the other, is going to be more sustainable than the other. I think, I don't know, I just think it'll be, but if you get the weighting right and the categories right, and then the logic of how the numbers are in the rubric that it's applied against are really well articulated, then I think you've solved it, like, you've cracked the problem, because what you've done is you've really made it pretty objective.
I would absolutely support that. Critical, defining what each of the evaluation criteria are, so we have a consensus among everybody when they look at it, and then determining what the weighting scale would be, and then passing that to a working group to provide us the ability to have further discussions on it.
All right, that's good.
so if what I take is we define these criteria, put some definition, and have them available, bring them back here to go over and make sure.
I would think
Get
we would
them
ask
ahead of
you
time,
guys to
too.
put that together
Yeah.
on the initial cut on that, and then draft that back to us. so
Can
we
you
can
see the screen?
What, that, Ron?
Can you see the screen?
We can see
Senior
the screen.
Westwood example.
Okay, so we took a stab at defining the criteria. So the educational guideline, these criteria, authentic learning, properly places education on display, grouping the classrooms.
Ron, sorry to interrupt you.
Ron, are you
We're
still on
looking
the,
at-
you're still on the,
Different.
you're still on the kind of traffic light matrix?
Okay, hold on. Sorry.
And I know where you're going with this, Ron. I'm not sure we need to read that through the lines. I think the committee's just saying,
So can you see this now?
Yeah, that's a
we see
definition.
something.
But that's what we would produce.
Oh,
for-
yeah, no, that's helpful, yeah, that's helpful,
All
yeah.
we're saying is, give
we
us
don't-
that, let us.
Let's not go through it all.
No, I don't want to go through it all. I just want to say that we're going to send this off to John, to Tim and John. And that's what we're looking for. We've got some guidelines here as to how to define these categories. You'll notice alphabetical comment. And we would fully expect you to go through these and say, this is what's important for us.
Okay.
And this is how
This is
to
helpful,
define this.
actually.
This will be much more.
And then you can, and then that's how we score it, right? So whatever this becomes, it's no longer arbitrary. It's not what my sense of education versus your sense of education. It's, does this option
Pretty good.
provide special education space to include practices of self-contained and inclusion programs?
Yeah,
I think this is what you're looking at, right? Pretty, I mean.
This
we need
is
to-
more detailed even though I thought this is great. Yeah, I think this is exactly what, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but this type of thing?
Yeah, if these are the categories that we're gonna
Right,
be
so we go
scoring,
from
then
the
yes.
short list, summary to detail. And we'll send, and, you know.
Yeah, as long as we get that and we all can agree and concur with that,
I think the working group
and
should take a look
then
at
come to
it.
an agreement on the weighting. Perfect.
And define what these mean.
Okay.
That's helpful. Okay, that's great.
What's our sequencing here, just in terms of timing? Our next meeting's a month out. When's
Yeah,
this all,
so-
you're gonna
so-
go through this?
Yeah, and I apologize, I don't think, I wanted Ron to put this up, but I don't think I sent it to him, so I'm gonna talk it through and then I'll send it to you guys. But, so the idea was that at the next, the working group meeting on next week, that we first of all are getting feedback on the options from the school, you know, the working group and people about just the different options, but that's more around just making sure we get them right. But then we are going to spend time on this issue. So we'll probably begin, I don't know that we'll get through it all in the hour and a half or 2 hours, but we'll begin finalizing the evaluation criteria, matrix criteria. The idea with doing the criteria. Now, I think that what we should probably do is have a building committee meeting. The next building committee meeting now is scheduled for August 22nd, which is, you know, I think we probably need an interim one to go through that, the criteria. And so what I would suggest is that after the 25th, maybe in the second week in August, we have a building committee meeting, and it's about criteria and just what we just did, including the weighting, and get you something ahead of time so you can be prepared to talk about it. But that starts next week on the working group. While we're doing this criteria evaluation process, which the idea is once we get the criteria down straight, we would then work with the working group to do a draft idea of how they would complete it. We would then present it to the committee, probably in draft form on the August meeting, at least for, you know, the beginning discussions. We may say that the best thing to do that is in early September even, at that point, I don't know. You know, we know we need 2 meetings with the building committee, one to present the draft and talk about it, and another one to come back and really talk about it and then vote on it at some point. So, and we want that done in September. And we also want to probably have a community forum done in the context of what we're thinking in mid-September. So that's how it's starting, is next week at the working group meeting. And then I think we do need a separate criteria-focused building committee meeting in early, second week of August.
I think that, from my opinion, that works, because I think the criteria as have been sort of proposed by Dorn Whittier and Vertex, like, we may nibble at the edges of that, but you guys have done that 100 times. Where I think there's going to be a lot of discussion is on the weighting,
On the
the
weighting.
point of sustainability, middle school, because that's ultimately where the decision will get made. If you weight one thing higher than the other,
Right.
it's gonna tip the scale one way or the other. So
And that's why I think seeing the unweighted scores makes sense
yeah,
as
you
well.
can see it as a counterpoint.
Yep.
Yeah, and then so I'm just thinking through. So the working group can work next week, because again, I think we're going to be nibbling on the edges of what the categories are. So we can start going through parking. Okay, like, this is the different impacts. Like, parking and traffic is definitely going to be, like, I can't imagine a scenario where that's not one of the things we're going to need to think about. So And then we come back, whatever, a week later to this full committee after they've had time to digest and like the proposed weighting that's been pushed forward. Maybe you can even collect some offline feedback so that when we get together, we can have a focused conversation on how to split 100 points among 15 categories.
Yeah. I think that, I think that's all doable. I think, so I believe that week of 8/1 would, that Thursday of August 1st is not a good time because I think there's a lot of people on vacation. At least I think we're having trouble getting the working group together for that. So I think we'll probably be talking about that second week in August.
August 12th.
Yeah. August.
When do you expect
School
comments from the MSBA on the,
The PDP comments, I mean, I think we'll probably get them by a couple of weeks, because I think they want to get them over with, because they get a whole bunch of these coming in at the end of July. So, I think we'll probably get them within a couple of weeks.
Can I take a step back real quick? Might be a dumb question, but what are we going to use this rubric for? So once we have it, not the rubric, but the results. Once we have the scores, what do we do with that? You know what I mean? I know we're going to vote. I'll just stop there. What do we use it for?
Well, it's the
It's the recommendation.
It's
right?
the
What
thing that,
program
We're saying that's going to be our choice?
That's our
That's not
choice.
necessarily true.
No, yeah,
We're
look-
going to vote. We're still going to vote on an option, irrespective of what the scores tell us, right?
So
That's why I'm asking the question. Like, what? how
I think-
important is
question
this?
whether you do it.
I
Well, it's a
believe,
recommendation. I think the working group, and, this work, we're gonna make a recommendation to the committee, and yeah, the committee in theory can,
I think a decision matrix is just a tool for us to use to highlight and have the discussion and look at different areas and consider different things. I think it will show you a potential result, not necessarily the result that you may pick at the end. But you should have at least a constructive discussion at the end of it to say, what are the pros, what are the cons? What do we like, what do we don't like? What's supportable, what's unsupportable? Because it may come out and say, well, this is what you should do.
right?
And that may be an untenable position in the end. And you have to be conscious. So I think it's just a tool to have the discussion, right? To bring up the salient points, to look at all the different areas. Because if it was it, all we should do is then vote. If all we were relying on was this decision matrix, put it up there. Whatever low score wins, that's it, put it in front of the voters. I don't think that's what we're asking to do.
No,
If you
but I
saw
do
that,
think.
that chart, two of them had the same score, so you, like, you
Yeah,
had two.
but there are ways to prevent that. I mean, that's why you have the weighting, that's why you have the different,
Yeah, no, I
because you
know.
want it to have shades of gray.
Yeah, there was never an intent that you would be presented an option and said, okay,
That's it.
this one told you the one to.
Okay.
It's more about, if you feel like you'd be presented an option, you might, I think this committee's going to take a long meeting, this committee, with a draft matrix in front and say, this one should change because we don't see the traffic in this one the way the working group recommended. This one might change because of the ed plan. And then if there is a vote that's taken, I would only say that if the vote's taken and it's different than what the matrix says, that you end up with, that you go back and look at the matrix, because there's a reason why you voted something different than the matrix says, because, it wouldn't make sense. And I think if you put up something as, this gets submitted to the MSBA, which is not the real, in my opinion, the most important reason for it. It should ultimately be put on the website to explain to the public why you arrived at that decision. So. it-
It is a tool to help us make the decision. That's how I,
That helps. That's the conversation I wanted to have. Because I agree. I agree that it's a tool. I think it's going to help us explain to ourselves and to the public kind of why certain decisions were made, how we value them. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of reasons for it. I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page in terms of like what it was going to be used for.
So the one thing that I think we should do is schedule a meeting for that maybe that second week in August.
Should we try to tap it adjacent to either school committee or council? One of the two of them, do it before.
next council meeting is the 12th of August, that Monday.
So that's the same day as the school committee, right?
So I would say you get the offset then.
I thought the school meeting was on Tuesdays. Now they on?
I don't know why it's on Monday, but it's on that Monday.
Oh, really?
the summer date,
Yes.
but I think the summer date was just a date that worked for people, like long-term, it's not, we're going back to Tuesday, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
So we're in conflict again. Stinks.
When do you want a building committee meeting?
I mean, I don't care if you guys want to piggyback it or. do
Well,
separately.
I think it
Now
could
that
either
they're
be that
saying
week of the 5th or the week of
It's
the.
nice to piggyback, but I don't care either. I was just thinking there were gonna be 3 meetings.
Really tough for me.
Yeah, we can make it the next week.
Want to do it before school? Do you want to do it on that Monday, the 12th? And back to back on,
Our meeting's gonna be at 7 o'clock that night.
ours, in theory, it'll be at 6. Want to do like, can we do like a 3 o'clock meeting? Is that too much to ask for folks? I know it's hard prep-wise sometimes going into a meeting.
It's not my preference,
Okay.
because I'm prepping for town council meeting.
Let's just do it another, we've
Yeah,
got the remote
that's true. We
options
can
too,
prep
so
it.
like,
And we might end up scheduling, some subcommittee might end up scheduling something before the meeting, that's common too,
Yeah.
you know, so like, it's probably not a good idea to do it before the council meeting, and Mike will probably have to be at one of those meetings.
Do we want to look at that week, though?
Tuesday would be tough for Michelle and I and
Yeah.
our team. We have a big retreat.
Wednesday or Thursday?
14th, maybe?
15?
I can't do the 15th. Can we shoot for the 14th? This is getting busy already.
the week before doesn't work because you've already looked at it because you were trying to schedule a different meeting.
Well, no, I know, well, Ron, you had mentioned the first, we can't do a working group because people aren't around.
Yeah.
Right. But we can do a building committee.
I could
Ethan will tell you, we got football starting in August too, 6, so 4 o'clock time is probably good.
I mean, the 8th would be,
Yeah, that's
okay. I may
out.
be remote.
Let's do the next week. How about Wednesday, the 14th?
14th at 4 o'clock?
Wednesday the 14th,
Works for me.
4 o'clock.
That would work for me. I can do that.
Yeah, it's fine.
We'll have a blended option for remote.
It would be better to do in person if we can, but we will have a hybrid.
Tim and I were talking, it's almost like it should either be remote or in person.
Yeah.
Because
This
the
one.
blended thing, this hybrid
Hybrid.
thing's tough, yeah.
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 Not that there won't be,
That week's gonna be hard for me. But we'll figure it out.
no, we'll always keep a hybrid option, but just in terms of,
And we'll have the recommendations and the information regarding the,
Yes, from the working group.
and a recommended weighting.
Yeah.
Okay? Thank you. Perfect.
Does that work for you, Ron, the 14th?
Yes, I can do that.
It's at 4 o'clock, right?
yeah. We could do earlier if people want to, I mean, doesn't really matter. I mean, want to do earlier just to,
I would say either do it at 4 or do it earlier, like 9.
I wouldn't mind doing a morning meeting. I mean, just obviously my.
I'm okay with it too.
I work.
Oh, okay, let's keep it at 4 then. Keep it at 4.
I could maybe do it, I could maybe do it later in the morning, I just can't do
That's-
it.
It would have been like the worst summer ever. And Zach's away at soccer camp that week, so it's like my 1 week where. So, whatever's fine.
Well, we will do it. You'll be part of the working groups. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you could participate hybrid a lot more.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so for now, 14th at 4.
That works.
Okay, great.
Good.
Are we
Just
ready? for
like
the
in
next
following up on that work plan discussion, so the next working group and that meeting and the building committee will be really heavily on about the evaluation matrix and the criteria and starting the process of completing it and the weights and all that. In the meantime, we are, as I mentioned, kind of working on the options to make them to begin, they need to be tweaked and worked in a way that works. So we're doing this sort of on a coincident path. It's not, I don't think there'll be significant enough changes that would significantly change the evaluation, but we may end up revisiting some of the evaluation, in September if at least some of the draft ideas, depending on how those tweaks occur as we move through it. The idea is to send draft options, these options to you folks sometime around that week of the 8th or something around that we're seeing them for the first time in detail at the next working group, and then I think once they get tweaked around that, the idea is to send them to this building committee. The plan was for this building committee on the 22nd to spend time around the options, more so than around the evaluation criteria, especially if we're gonna have a dedicated meeting on that. But we will probably have both, it's gonna take time. I mean, it's gonna be a long meeting, but so our idea is to have the building committee meet on the 22nd. We also are looking at a meeting on, we are looking at probably another meeting in early September to sort of now look at what a final draft of the matrix would look like at that point, so that we at least put in front of it. It can change, it will change. I'm sure that meeting will cause changes to it. But then, that allows us then to come to the final meeting in September, or the meeting in September where we sort of review the final matrix, which we're looking at as being on the 19th, about sometime in the middle of the third week in September. And then we wanted to talk with you at some point whether we should now, so we talked about a community forum probably happening in between those two meetings. That way you have a first look at it, hear what the public says, and have a sort of final decision-making look at it. So we haven't picked that forum date, but, anytime between September 5th and the 19th would probably be good. It wouldn't be bad to put on the table, and I know that, there's time of year is when school gets busy, in terms of night meetings and
Open houses, yeah.
open houses.
All right, we'll look at it, though.
But that would be good if we could put something on the calendar and start to
Yep.
socialize it, because that'll be a big meeting for people to see the development that's occurred in the summer. And we are making a decision pretty quickly thereafter.
I'm obviously just thinking out loud because I haven't processed this, but I almost wonder if like our forum, the next forum can be all virtual. I don't know if that's good or bad, or just something to consider. I just think for some reason, I'm struggling with like the hybrid concept just because the audio is tricky and, but remember during COVID when everybody was online, it just.
Well, we find when you do virtual meetings, you get hundreds of participants.
Right. I don't know if that is good for something like this, because the next forum, we're going to be talking about really important things, right? Like the option. So, I don't know, just something to mull over in the next couple of months, or next month, I guess.
I understand that. I think I agree with you. I also think we want to have as many options as possible for people
Yeah.
to be able to participate, considering how important this one is.
Sure.
So like, have that in-person option. I feel like we kind of have to.
Yeah. Now that like I said, I was just thinking out loud, but yeah, you're right. Because some people like that.
Yeah.
There are definitely certain people who have
Wouldn't-
never used a Zoom.
Well, exactly. That's sorry to
That's
think. There's a
fair.
whole population that we need to make sure we capture. All right, scratch that from the record. Strike that from the record.
I do think you're right, though. Like a one-dimensional meeting is a
is
much
easier.
better meeting
Yeah.
than a two-dimensional.
Settle
meeting.
on a date, though, that would be helpful. Like, not now, but I mean.
All right, I'll look at the dates and let me work with Michelle and we'll maybe put some options out.
I feel like we sort of have to defer to you guys on whatever works at the school. 'cause there's
Open
so-
houses every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday during the entire month of September,
That's what I
until we
remember.
get to the last week of September, but we'll see if we can strategize, maybe putting two of the small schools on the same day or something.
Yeah, we might just have to do
Move
some
something.
tweaking on that too. Okay.
Go off-site.
No, it's not about the location. It's about not having a whole school population not available. You know what I mean? Is that what you meant?
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
So, that's the plan, though, laying out kind of a decision at the end of September. We're gonna send these to the cost estimators in September when they've been tweaked and finalized. And, what comes back from the cost estimators, I mean, that might cause us to relook at things, but largely our expectation is we're gonna kind of know roughly where we're at with that. And then that'll be in early October. We basically need to submit this by the October 25th, so the pencils down and kind of the preparation of all that is sometime in, early to mid-October to get it ready and submit it in. Ron, did you want to talk about that MEP issue?
Yeah, I think that one thing, if you remember, just very quickly here, if you remember, we talked about the issues and with the working group, and what we're looking for now, we have to develop this PSR cost estimate. We had included 100% geothermal as our basis of design. So it's all electric and it's cheap. We are going to share with Ron a document that our engineering team is putting together that's going to show you the cost analysis, the cost benefit of doing this when compared to the Inflation Reduction Act and when compared without the Inflation Reduction Act. Because what we're finding on, Tim is doing this as well, is that the geothermal option is the efficient option. And as it's turning out, it's actually the least expensive to factor in the Inflation Reduction Act. So we want to get this up in front of you because as we start talking about sustainability, maybe each of our options. But we need to take a look at how we site. So we want to get this in front of you because in October, whenever that meeting takes place, we'll make a call to vote. We do have to vote on the basis of the design for the pool. So we're approving the program, we're approving the basis of design, which is tied into the cost estimate, and we're approving the number on part of that October 24th. So what we're going to end up, is for you to look at. Email back any questions, right? And then, that gives you enough time to in September, beginning of October.
Okay, so I want to recap
Yeah, I was
this.
gonna say, can I ask a question? Tim, the audio was obviously super poor. I assume you know what this is going on here. Can you
Yeah.
give us can you replay that for us?
So what Ron's talking about is they're preparing a mechanical system matrix or analysis of what different systems will, both their return on investment and how much they'll cost and all that. The big one that he's worried, that he wants to get the committee thinking about is whether or not we use geothermal from a site planning perspective, because the geothermal fields need to be thought about in the site plan. And so that's what he's saying to the committee, because we've talked about this today, is he's going to be sending out a document. We're going to review it with the working group and talk about it, but then we are going to want to probably come, I had that's planned on coming in that August meeting to talk about after you guys had it for a few weeks. But we may, if we have time, we may want to bring it up and if it works in that earlier August meeting. And so we can have a discussion around whether geothermal gets implemented into the project. The IRA rebates, so, right now, there's a lot of money that's available that would, going through the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, to get geothermal basically paid for, the premium, what used to be a premium. I believe Ron's telling me now that it's actually more money than even that, so it becomes a little, it almost discounts it a bit, or even less, it takes some, so the geothermal can become the most cost-effective with the rebate. I think it's, that's something the committee needs to discuss. There's a lot of money in that act. You don't get the rebate until the end, after you show you've got it up and running and it's working. But you do get, we're still working through with the MSBA and the it's implemented by the IRS, how much we can get commitments of, to be able to, people can actually count on the money. But a lot of communities are accessing it right now.
I think geothermal is a good option for us to consider, but I'd like to see the implications of either a horizontal design or vertical design based on the site plans and how they're all laid out.
Yep, did you hear that, Ron? When you say vertical design, what do you mean?
Well, so geothermal, it's got to
I
be,
did, so geothermal can be done in a horizontal way on parking lots, and it can be done vertical through wells. In this part of the country, wells are predominantly
We're only seeing,
Unless you have a water source, so unless we're putting this under a pond, the horizontal coil not gonna give you the same, heat resistance and heat building well.
but maybe they can
You can
explain,
explain all that.
yeah.
Yeah, if it's not there, I'd like to see it. I think it's a good option for us to explore.
So a document's coming out. When do you think that will be out, Ron?
Next week?
That's fine.
That's good news.
Yeah.
Can reliability be part of the analysis too? You know what I mean? Like not just cost and, ongoing operational costs, but also reliability of the energy source, in some way, because I don't know much about geothermal, right? Sounds like Mike does, but I don't.
A little bit.
So again, I would like to know, is this like a foolproof source of energy? You know what I mean? Like, how does it compare to oil?
Yeah,
Like,
Well,
how often is the geothermal plant going to break down? You know what I mean? Under the building, like that's the sort of thing.
Simply put, it's 50 degrees consistent.
Forever.
Right.
And what it's going to use is a heat exchange, right, to either heat or cool, right? So, and what you're doing is you're building off of a basis of 50 degrees. So even though the temperature outside might be 20, because it's underneath the ground and it's keeping water or a liquid coolant or some material at that 50 degrees, you only have to adjust the temperature from 50 up or down to wherever you need it to be. So it does have its mechanical issues and problems.
Yeah, how often
right?
does it fail? And then
Right.
what happens
But
if it fails?
The
at a
maintenance
school?
cost would be good to know on that, because if
Yeah.
you're factoring in, other than just cost of procurement, what's it cost to maintain? What's the impact on the facilities over the long? And Ernie, have you ever dealt with one?
Nope.
Okay, so,
Did you hear this, Ron?
It's
Yeah, I
definitely-
got it all, and that, we are gonna put together numbers that are upfront cost, operational cost, and future maintenance and longevity. So the nice thing about geothermal is you never replace the wells.
yeah, with the all electric, we're looking at a heat pump anyway.
But at the same time, in the geothermal equipment platform, all of that part of this, that we can see.
I mean, reliability is going to be one of those judgments because it's in widespread use only in the last 5 or 6 years, so.
Yeah, yeah. All right, great.
Well, yeah, I've got, geothermal's been taking a big, for a long time. So we can, the clients have had geothermal for 20 years.
That'd be good.
Okay, so we'll have that, that's the other, I would say that's another
Yeah.
kind of big thing we're dealing with.
Do we have to put some minutes? and
Yeah,
stuff?
Michelle, what's next?
We are going to go move to the minutes and, yep.
Yeah, we have, I believe that covered design options progress, which was the third discussion item. You
Yeah.
Good with that? Okay. Two approvals that we're looking for, the OPM's vendor invoice package dated June 30th, 2024, and then the meeting minutes from the June 18th meeting.
Make a motion to approve the first one?
Vendor
VIP.
invoice
Yeah,
package.
Vendor invoice package, the VIP.
Second.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, I got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Me, I didn't read it. So that motion passed.
With one abstention.
Yeah, unanimously with an abstention.
Okay. And second, June 18th, 2024, SBC meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor to approve the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion passes unanimously.
Just rolled into that pretty easy.
Done it a few times.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Okay, motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
No discussion on
All
this.
right, oh, good, then we're done.
You gotta vote.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
For, the
Beautiful,
Motion passed.
thank you.
other 14. And we have.